wonderful NHS to look after us from birth to death, and I think it does as good a job as it's allowed to by whatever government is in power.
Now we slipped out there, so I just tell you that Mick and I were talking about the headline this morning in the Eye, which is the Metro, the baby poisoner. But the Daily Express has got the same headline: poisoner at work, nurse killed 7 babies, and I believe is somewhere it says that she tampered with, if you like, another 10, and that's. Is you are expressing your concern, Mick, about this sort of situation?
I am, because a baby is the one thing in life that needs the most protection. A newborn, it's a wonderful thing for its parents, and the NHS, of course, this is one person employed by the biggest employer in the UK. But if she is found guilty, it is a tragedy. Oh, it's a tragedy. These babies have died anyway, irrespective of how. Uh, but it is a great concern that one person can cause such havoc within our society today.
Yeah. How do people slip through the net?
Goodness only knows. I suppose that the statistics really, until they start moving on a ward or in the hospital, they do not really. There's not really too much of an indication. I'm sure that most people would look at it and they might have concerns, but they're not really going to bring them forward. It's very, very difficult. Once there is deep concern, of course, I'm sure people do bring things forward, but the first one may well be coincidence, or it looked quite normal. I'm not going to say it's a scandal that this person got away with allegedly killing 7 babies. I am going to say it's a scandalous behaviour from her, and completely and utterly unacceptable.
Yes.
If proved to be true.
Somebody said to me the other day, I can't remember if it was in a conversation, but it may have been young Max who is with me for a couple of days each week. And he said, look, this person doesn't look like a criminal. And the photograph on the front page of the Express shows a young lady that you would take home to mother, wouldn't you?
One of the biggest problems we have today is people making instant judgments on body shaming. They'll look at somebody who's in the newspapers for whatever reason and say, well, it looks obvious. And then there are others that don't. You cannot tell a criminal by looking at them.
No, you sure
tell
can't.
A criminal by their actions, not by their looks.
No, this young lady would, a broad smile and her hair swept back, and she looks clean and neat, and so on and so forth. If you and I were 60 years younger, we'd ask her out on a date, probably.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As it happens, the great con artist of New York is, I believe, being released from prison this week, or has just been released. And this was a woman who created her own persona and absolutely defrauded people of millions. A very charming, good-looking lady, a Matterhorn.
Yeah, I always feel completely safe from that sort of thing because I haven't got millions. Now, the Mirror goes the same way this morning. Poisoner on the baby ward. The Times is also NHS nurse in the dock for murdering 7 babies. The Sun, likewise, a poisoned nurse killed 7 babies and tried to murder 10 more. The Daily Mail, right. The Daily Mail has got the picture of this young lady on the front page, but the day death rained from the sky. And that is the latest attack from Russia on Kiev. And actually, it's the first attack on Kiev. The rockets haven't reached that far so far, but it's caused outrage around the world, I think.
Well, firstly, I've got to say my thoughts are entirely with the people of the Ukraine who have to live with this daily, this monstrous behaviour from a so-called civilized nation. There is absolutely no justification in attacking civilians and civilian targets, and that's what the Russians are doing. They can't beat the Ukrainians militarily, so it looks like for the time being they go for the soft underbelly of the general population. And it is an absolute concern. My thoughts are with them.
Yeah, I think we must all be very careful when we say Russians, because I've lived and worked there and have many Russian friends, and actually I find them to be a fairly kind and gentle people. The trouble is that their type of government gives rise to authoritarian regimes.
It's very authoritarian. In fairness, it was authoritarian under the Tsars as well. So nothing really has changed.
No,
And it is the regime, and of course we all believe, we're aware that the Russian citizen, the average Russian citizen, is not as fully informed as we are.
that's very true. Very true. I mean, that's one of the things that I did find. As I say, I worked and lived there, and in fact, strangely enough, I was working on the television station which was supposed to inform the rest of the world, and which actually started off with great hopes and then went awry. And once this war started, we banned it in Britain. I have to say that I'm disappointed in that. I'm disappointed that Russia Today television, as it was known, RT, went that way, because it didn't start out that way. And in fact, many friends of mine, intelligent people, said that they liked to watch it as an alternative, but not anymore.
I have to say that I quite enjoyed listening to George Galloway.
Yes, yeah.
Sunday evenings are not quite the same now. He is a great orator, as anyone would have seen his address to the Congress or the Senate in America when they accused him of all nefarious things, of which he was completely and utterly innocent. But yes, his chat show was very, very good. I quite enjoyed it. It was entertaining.
Zelensky pleads for more help to combat Russian terrorist attacks. This is something that bothers me a little bit. Liz Truss apparently is striding the streets and saying our support will be as much as it ever was. But the EU, some of those countries have fluttered a little bit. Do you think that they're going to continue to support Ukraine?
We have a great difficulty here, because obviously traditionally there was the Eastern Bloc, and certain countries like Hungary are totally dependent on Russia for their energy supplies. Surprisingly, the Bulgarians, which used to be the sort of dirty doers of the Russian state, they're sort of standing fairly firm with the EU. And of course, the Baltic states are totally firm. It's understandable that some of the EU nations, through historic reasons and through trade contracts, particularly energy, are a little bit wavering. But it's nice to see that virtually everyone else has stood up in unity. And in fact, the UK, although we're no longer a part of the EU, we do seem to be getting on with them very well at the moment.
Yeah.
We're in great accord, and we do seem to be looking at doing something about our outstanding differences.
Yeah, Liz and Macron seem to be getting on quite well, don't they?
They do indeed, yeah.
Not like Boris and Macron.
It could be a honeymoon period at the moment.
Absolutely. We have to wait, don't we? Right, the Daily Telegraph goes back to the nurse who used insulin to kill babies. The trial has been told. Now, the Financial Times, it goes back to what we are suffering here. That is inflation, cost of living, energy costs, etc., etc. And its headline, although it does cover the Ukraine situation, is borrowing costs soar again as the Bank of England and the Chancellor fail to calm the markets.
Yes, well, this morning on the Sky News that I was watching, they were going on about a possible 65 billion black hole, and pointing out the government lending, firstly through COVID, secondly through finance problems, and now with this, is the third highest ever. I think we'll wait with bated breath to see what the Chancellor is going to do when he announces his full plans to the world. But I have to say that from my point of view, where high finance is not my business, my worry is the cost of petrol and the cost of my meal and my rent, my rates for my water and everything else. I think we're in a terrible time of uncertainty. We haven't got a clue. We really haven't got a clue what this winter and what next summer is going to bring us. And I think that is more concerning than large government debt.
Well, I tend to agree with you, but what I've been doing on this program is I've been most unkind to MPs because I figure that the tail is wagging the dog. It did so with David Cameron towards the end. It did so with Theresa May. It did so with Boris Johnson, and now it's doing it with Liz Truss. And I say a curse on all 650 of them is they shouldn't be there. They're all there for wrong reasons. They're there because we don't deal with ratios, not whether they can do the job. And they patently, I would say, are showing that they can't do the job.
Well, I find it very difficult that every election there's a manifesto, and all those MPs are elected on the back of their party's manifesto. And then, of course, we find that no, we don't really like that. No, we're not going to go with that. We're not going to support that. And it starts crumbling apart again. And we have seen it, yes. Boris was very much put to the knife by his backbenchers. And Liz Truss is having a heck of a time keeping him on side. She seems to just about be doing it at the moment. But certainly they got understandably wavery over the Chancellor's financial statements of recent, and that horrendous plunge of the dollar. It stands at 110 today, but I mean, can you imagine the embarrassment of an English pound being worth 99 cents?
Yes, absolutely.
Goodness me.
Absolutely. I mean, particularly since they have their own petrol over there,
Yes.
And they can keep a cap on the price. So we're going to see movies, we're going to see film clips and so on and so forth, and news with people gay abandon driving around while we're queuing up at the pumps to pay. How much is a litre of petrol now?
170.
Yeah, there you go, 170. I haven't got a car anymore. So I'm more concerned at the £4 pint. But right, okay. The eye.
That's cheap. Go to Scotland, where they've now got a tax on alcohol.
Oh God.
And in the Brewdog Hotel in Edinburgh, where I dined recently, it's £6.50 a pint.
Oh, that's ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, not a bad pint, but
yeah,
but yeah,
I mean,
£6.50.
Yeah.
North of the border, yes, it is. It has made a difference with the way they put in this new alcohol tax.
I mean, before this crisis, I was getting a bit upset when I saw that a pint was £4, and to have £2.50 put onto it, that's a lot of, that's a big increase.
Well, it is. Saying that, I was in the Dorset last Thursday, and there was a pint of Harvey's, of which I've not actually come across this particular Harvey's before, £3.
Really?
Really? Yeah.
Oh, well, what was it called?
I can't remember, but I did have two of them.
Now, 2 pints for £6 isn't bad.
2 pints for £6 in Lewis these days, very acceptable. Yeah.
Now, the eye that sometimes is not kind to the Conservatives, at least says Truss faces showdown with the rebels. And the Parliament meets today for the first time since she's become PM, I think. And they will actually listen to what the government has to say about its mini budgets, etc. So today is her showdown day, isn't it?
It is indeed.
We'll have to watch the headlines.
Indeed, will it be Keir Starmer's show up day?
Well, it may be. It may be. I mean, one of the things that somebody on your Facebook page, Lewis Present, made the comment. I was looking at it last night and made the comment is, Keir Starmer is doing very well, but he's so colourless.
He is. He would have got on well with John Major.
yes. Actually, 2 suits.
Yeah.
Now, the Star. It always gives me a big chuckle or a giggle, and I haven't seen the Star front page this morning. Forget WFH. Now we're WFP. Now, what's that all about? I'll have to look at that. is the Daily Star splashes on a picture of a pony in a pub as it reports on them offering work from home. Oh, yes, that's right. They've reported that a lot of pubs are saying, why stay at home and work when you can come to us? What we're going to do is we're going to give you free coffee, free food, and so on. Of course, you buy your own booze, but not only that, you use our heat.
Yes.
I wonder if that's going to work. Anybody going to do that in Lewis?
I've no idea, but it highlights a serious problem, and that is the energy costs now to hostelries, hotels, hostelries, restaurants even. I was at a meeting last night where in fact the main heating was off because they need a component for the boiler. It was a very large building, but luckily there was a lot of us and a couple of fan heaters, and it kept the place quite conveniently heated. But it is going to be a problem. Who's going to drink in a cold pub? You're not going to do it.
That's right. Now, you being a historian will know that in about 1850, we had 67 pubs here and 17 breweries, mainly because the water was undrinkable. And even the kids had their own beer, mild beer.
That's right.
But also because the houses of that particular time were very cold. So they would go to the pub to stay warm. Looks as if history is repeating itself.
It does indeed. Yeah.
There we go. History is made. Symes and Hayes making history. Okay. Now, the only other thing that I'm going to mention is that locally we are experiencing a COVID comeback. And Arran apparently is the worst at the moment. But just in the past week, we've seen quite a jump across Sussex in COVID. What's your take on that?
Well, certainly the numbers that I know, people who've got it, seem to be up. The government statistics I'm not really too sure about because they're sort of not really that easy to find anymore. They used to be put in front of us every single day, and now they're disappearing. But one thing is concerning me a little bit is for people of my age, we're being given the booster jab and we're being offered it along with the flu jab. A number of people I know who have had it have immediately come down with quite strong flu symptoms. It's literally laid them out for 2 or 3 days and left them feeling quite groggy. I had my booster last Thursday and I declined the flu, and I'm fine. I haven't had it. My brother had his the previous Thursday, and he literally didn't get out the house till the following Monday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and this is sort of being confirmed by a lot of people I've spoken to, that they've had this reaction, or they've got friends who've had this reaction to the current flu jab.
Yes. Oh, really? Yeah, to the jab.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I've had 4. Should I have had 5?
No, it is for
Four.
COVID at the
Right.
moment. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, some people are dismissing, being very dismissive about any new COVID threat. It's now only just a mild form of flu. But it sounds to me as if some people, just even from the jab, have been quite ill.
Well, this is the flu that's causing the problem, but COVID, the Omicron variant, clearly was less harmful than earlier versions of it. But one thing has come up in the media is the Americans have been hunting through, allegedly, the supplies of PPE in 2019 and identified a reduction and shortage of PPE going into the States. And they sort of checked round and found there was a shortage of PPE coming out of China. And the inference is that the Chinese were storing it away a bit quickly because they knew about things
recurring
before it occurred.
Yeah.
Yes. So the whole story of where did COVID start from is now back in the mix, up for discussion with this additional import-export statistics.
Well, that's an interesting take on it. Right, now we're going to talk about bonfire in a minute, but let's just show what we we broadcast on the White Hart, and I love the White Hart now. So let's just take a look before we. White Hart Hotel, which is where we broadcast from each day. And who would want to work from home? And you can come into a wonderful environment such as this, cozy, really cozy, and the start of the fire season. Wonderful Jane lit the fire.
Do you know each other?
And makes us as snug as a bug in a rug, or at least a fella next to the fire.
My wife.
Oh, yes, the little sausage. Oh,
I get it in here all the time online.
frosty morning, as it is this morning, the first of the year. And I am just like a pig in a blanket.
That's what happens now.
That's the polite term for it. And I can't tell you how satisfied and smug I feel that I come here every day.
They are, yeah. Is your man here?
Be jealous.
Is he coming down?
So you should be. The White Hart.
Okay, that's good.
Outdoor television.
Yes, we have indeed.
Kevin Kramer.
Oh, hang on. We've got to come back. We got Stuart Dolby. You know what Stuart's like. He comes in and starts to talk off camera, right? He expects you to hear him, and he rabbits on. But he will be back in about half an hour with a guest to interview who is from Hong Kong and is an old pal from his days when he was a reporter. Mind you, you're a bit of a reporter now with your energy stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to talk to Mick in the meantime because he's here to tell us about Bonfire. And it's my belief, Mick, that there are people so many people have come into town, particularly in the 2 years when Bonfire was sort of on the back burner, who don't know what it's all about.
Excuse the pun.
And yet there are also people who have been here for quite a number of years who don't really know the innards of it, as it were. So start from the beginning and assume that everybody is amongst those who have just come in, and give us a background to Bonfire.
Well, the greatest difficulty we have here is we have a celebration, and it is a celebration, and we are celebrating the fact that the great gunpowder plot of 1605 was foiled. And the original celebrations were more like ringing the church bells and the odd bonfire, but they were actually enacted by law. There was a law passed that it had to be celebrated. And that law, in fact, remained on the statute books till 1859. The thing was in Lewis that bonfire had been going on for a long time before that, and it finally got incredibly well organised in 1853. So by the time the law went into abeyance and was removed, it was very much a thing in Lewis, and everyone really enjoyed it. And it was a great attraction to people from the area. People were coming from Brighton. There are reports of 60,000 people coming to Lewis for the bonfire celebrations. Now, I'm sure they were a little bit exaggerated, because bonfire does involve a little bit of exaggeration, but that's showmanship. But nevertheless, it's been something that has always attracted visitors. Visitors bring money, and others who come here the rest of the year, tourists, bring money. The main high street was originally the road from east to west, and the shops and the hostelries that were on it were there to service travellers. They weren't for the public. The public was serviced by all the little corner shops and the little businesses and the hawkers who went around. But the main high street was to deal with travellers through the town. But anyway, it's one of the greatest things of Sussex. I think it's the greatest thing that happens in Lewis. And it is a surprise, if not a shock, to anyone who's never seen it before.
That's for sure.
It is loud, it is colourful, it is brash, and it's ingenious. This year we have probably a vintage year in possible subjects for society's tabs, for instance. I for one, apart from the fact I haven't got a clue what my own society is even going to do, because they're done in great secrecy. I wouldn't.
When you're finished, sorry.
I wouldn't want to put a gamble on exactly what we see. Will we see 6 Her Majesty the Queen going down the town? Will we see 6 King Charlies? Will we have 6 Putins? Will we have at least one? I can't even pronounce the gentleman's name. The president of the Ukraine,
Zelensky, yeah.
We just don't know. We haven't got a clue, and that's the great joy. So I'm sure that a lot of people will be anxious to know what they are and to see them.
Yeah.
But
may I ask you a question?
Yeah, go on.
One of the things that I've lived here a long time, intermittently, and I've found there's a certain nationalism in the whole thing. Like, I went all to the top of the Brewers, one day, and there's a guy dressed up as a cavalier, and I was at the top, and he said, "How long have you been here?" He said, I said, "Oh, about 40 years." He said, "It's not enough. I was born here." and then you got people like Kevin Kramer, which I exaggerate, of course. He says, I said, "Well, because you was born here, Kevin, does that mean to say you can burn people at stake, particularly Catholics?" It's just a joke. And that because when you said it was about Guy Fawkes, there was this whole thing about the burning of the martyrs before that. That was in 1550, wasn't it? The 17 martyrs.
I can say that there is very much part of today's celebrations is reflecting and commemorating the 17 martyrs.
Oh, right.
However, that was not part of the beginning of bonfire at all.
No, I know.
The original celebration here was entirely on the gunpowder plot.
Good morning, Mr. Dolby.
Sorry.
Good morning.
Yes, the 17 martyrs do come into it. They have most certainly been involved since the late 1800s.
Yeah.
And it is one of the spectacular sights of the night are those 17 fiery crosses being carried down.
That's right, yeah.
And indeed, one society has the name of every martyr on their cross. Yes.
No.
Now, for those people who don't understand what it's all about, is this is a get-together of 6 separate bonfire societies.
Absolutely. It's 6 separate societies, each holding their own event on the same night in the same town, but covering some combined parts of it and some unique parts. Each society has its own traditional area it comes from, and it has its own fire site. And this is one of the most difficult things for people to understand. It's not a united bonfire celebration. And even there used to be what was known as the Grand United Procession, which in fact was 4 of the town societies, or 3 back in the day. And that still is something that happens. We have 4 societies follow each other down the high street, but that is purely a matter of timing and expedience. It's no longer a properly formed united procession. It's just simply that we all have to come down the high street at the same time of the evening, and the easiest way to do it
is to get together.
Is to walk behind each other, but we no longer call it the United Grand Procession.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that might amuse people is amongst those you'll see sort of I don't know, the Ringmer Bonfire Society. Some of the villages come and join in with their own societies, do they not?
There are something like about 32, 34 societies throughout Sussex. And traditionally, there's been a long and deep connection between societies around the county. Many societies will have gone to the forming, the first market processions and meetings of those bonfire societies. So each society invites its own friends.
Right.
That's really what it's about. So the visiting societies, they're called. These are the societies we will go out and actually go and visit during the virtual 3 months of the bonfire season. So,
well, it's a spectacular affair. But now explain that after the processions, that you each process to a bonfire site.
Absolutely.
What happens there?
Well, this is the highlight of the evening, really. Having done our main processions, we take our tableaus up to our fire sites, where each one of them has a huge bonfire, and it will also be the site of a dramatic firework display, along with set pieces and the tableau. The tableau in itself, they are loaded with fireworks, which is why they actually disappear halfway through the evening, because somebody has to get inside them and fuse them all up. Because obviously in the old days they were fused up as they were towed through the town, but we can't do that anymore. So now they're completely inert. They can't accidentally be fired. So the tab team have to get up there and crawl inside and whack all these fuses together.
So some of these effigies aren't seen in the parade.
No, the tabs will be in the parade initially, but then they're quickly removed to fire sites.
Right.
We tow ours off before we actually put our procession together to walk up to the fire site to give the tab team a time to fuse it up.
Right.
But yes, everyone displays their fire sites, and then we have 6 of the most magnificent firework displays that take place in the county.
Right.
6 of them. Quite often, the aerials can be seen from a number of vantage points around the town. And
Name a couple.
Well, one of them is actually our own bonfire site up on Lamport Bottom. We don't get to see Cliff, because Cliff do not fire theirs until everyone else is done. But we do get to see the top of Waterloo. We do get to see the high aerials of Commercial Square and Southover, depending on. But it's great if you're up on the golf course. I did actually go up on the golf course one evening. I think it was about 2009 with my daughter. And for once, I saw something that no bonfire boy will normally see, and that was the processions up and down the high street, going around the town, and then the magnificence of looking down on the firework display.
Right. Magnificent, I would have thought. Yeah,
it was unreal. It was getting all your firework sites in for free, and the cheers and applause from the crowd up there was quite astonishing. It really was. I'm sure the Bonfire Societies would on reflection realise that they are putting on a show for people who are not actually on their fire site.
It's much appreciated, I think, generally speaking. But I think the important thing for somebody such as yourself to explain what bonfire is all about is there are those people who don't bother to do their research and so on that say, oh, well, it's anti-Catholic. And then the poor old Zulus had to not black up one year. I mean, there is nothing sinister in these things.
They're never, in all honesty, Lewis used to be a very, very Orthodox Protestant town, and religion was behind it. We can't deny that. That's why there was a great push. But for the last, certainly since World War II, that doesn't come into it at all. On the other hand, costumes, the reason costumes are picked, they all have a meaning and a purpose. And what upset me personally was that the Zulu costume was never about denigrating or insulting Zulus. It was one of the finest, most colourful forms of costume that ever came out. It was costume, and that was it. And we quite admired the Zulus, we still do. But nevertheless, we had to put up with people whose views, not only on fire, to be honest, but just about everything seems to be contrary to common sense. We've got this generation of people who want to pick argument with everything. You can't even talk normally anymore without.
No, you're absolutely right. But just on the Zulu thing is, I've spent quite a bit of time in Nigeria. A couple of African countries really, but mostly in Nigeria and right throughout the country. And I told them about this, and they looked at me in absolute disbelief and they started to laugh. They couldn't believe that anybody could take that sort of thing seriously. So, as far as I'm concerned, is we make idiots of ourselves when these people sort of attack us, but even more so when we give way to it. But nonetheless, that's just me.
Yeah, it's difficult, but we have to move. We have to move with our members, and that's how Bonfire works. It's propelled by the members, the wishes of the members, not by the public or its critics.
Right. Well, I hope that the members are steadfast and realise that this is historical, not social commentary.
Yeah, they are, but we haven't got Zulus walking at the moment.
Oh dear, that is sad.
The costume is stood down. That's not to say it won't come up again in the future. It may well do, but certainly it's not likely to be seen around.
Well, when perhaps our society becomes more sophisticated, instead of getting all upset about silly nonsense. But I mean that's the society that we're in at the moment. Isn't it is. Pull down a statue. Yeah.
We'll leave it to the next generation to decide what they do. But at the moment, no, that part of controversy is no longer part of our evening. It doesn't detract from our event or our enjoyment.
What you want to bet that the people who like criticising will find something to criticise?
Oh, there will always be something for those that haven't got anything better to do. And those that criticise Bonfire are basically people who've got nothing better to do. It's not a soft target. It's really not. There's a great banner that gets carried around the town in a number of societies. We're not carrying it at the moment, but we did at one point. It's the Bonfire Boys Arms. It simply has the motto, true to each other. And as much as we might argue, and as much as my name certainly gets dragged through a bit now and then.
Well, you're a wonderful target. I laughed like hell when I saw last year.
Well, somebody has to be the target. The bottom line is true to each other, and we would support each other to the end. That's it. It's such is the nature of the beast.
Absolutely, and I like that sort of camaraderie.
Yeah, but this year we do have a little minor problem. And that is that last week it was announced that we knew the trains were stopping at 3:00 in the afternoon, but it was also announced the roadblocks are going to go up at 3:00 in the afternoon. Bit of a surprise, to be honest, which sort of throws a lot of logistics into turmoil, because obviously you've got to get everything and everybody into the town now before 3:00. Whereas before you had the latitude of getting some of the stuff in at 4:45. And that is actually under discussion, and it's been pointed out to the police and the authorities that it is making life more than a little bit awkward. For instance, your bands that come along, they're going to have a very long night walking up and down anyway, but they've now got to sit around and twiddle their thumbs and tune their
2 or 3 hours before
for another couple of hours.
Yeah.
And also, on another point, I certainly wouldn't want to see a lot of the public here taking advantage of an extra hour or two's drinking.
That's a good consideration.
We're very, very careful. In Bonfire, it's absolutely not on to be drunk in your society.
I would think also.
We don't have it. Yeah. We don't like it if the public are around, because if they get a little too leery. But nevertheless, they're all by the bys. I had a lady on to me last night about the trains, and I said, you have to be, she wanted to know what time the last train was stopping at Cooksbridge. I said, well, I would assume it will be the last train that gets to Lewes before 3:00. And she said, oh, well, it's all listed. There's one stopping there at 17:54. I said, I can only refer you to Lewes District Council's page, and I can say that the railway timetables may well not be reflecting the current update, but I can't speak for the railways. So we do have a little bit of confusion. I mean, as far as I can say to people, if you are coming into Lewes, be by vehicle, or by bus or by train, be here before 3 o'clock. That's it. After 3 o'clock, you'll have to walk from the roadblocks. It's not a problem. Most of them are a mile or less. But it's not helpful this time of the year to have things that are not quite as clear as they
No,
should be.
absolutely. I would have thought that it would be a nightmare too. That people who turn up at 3:30 or 3:45 is that there's going to be a big backlog of people who don't know what time the roadblocks are going to go.
I'm sure there will be. I'm sure there will be. One other concern is last year we had a lot of tow trucks passing us up at Neville Road that were going out towards Oakham, and they were pulling 4 cars at a time away. And they were running all night. You know, bit annoying because obviously there's a road closure on, but it suited the police to allow tow trucks to run all the way along Neville Road, which was shut.
It's good to have a nice, tolerant man like you sitting next to me, because I'm totally intolerant.
Yeah,
I think that the local council handle things, generally speaking, as badly as Westminster does. You know, a plague on all their houses, as far as I'm concerned. Now, you be nice about them.
I can't be too nice about Lewis District Council. I've got to say that I'm really waiting for somebody to come forth and say what has been the benefit of joining up with Eastbourne Borough Council.
Yes.
Please come forth and tell me, is it efficiency? Because everyone seems to see inefficiency. Is it finance? We have the highest rates here, the 4th highest rates in the country. And when it comes down to bonfire, you'd think they'd have a dedicated team that work on it every year, that know exactly what goes on, and do their very best to make life incredibly easy for what is the biggest event in the area.
Absolutely. That merger was the biggest disaster that anybody. If somebody had sat down with an envelope and said, "How can we make a huge mistake?" and listed them all, this would have come top.
We have lost a lot of people, a lot of staff here in Lewis have retired, taken early retirement, moved on. A lot of staff that knew the town, knew the area, knew its people, knew how things got done.
Here's Kevin. Kevin has come in here. He's getting the bar ready, you see. Yeah.
Fonts of wisdom. And we haven't got it. Of course, it's been, I suppose, shielded a little bit by COVID with everyone working from home, which you have to excuse the fact that if you're at home, you're not necessarily in front of in your office, and things are not necessarily as easy. But it appalls me that we're dealing with different people every year in the council.
Yes.
And they haven't got a dedicated team to promote what is a most wonderful event, and which is the highlight of many people's years.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're going to have a town to be properly governed, it should be people who are from the town, in the town, and know what the local problems are. Yeah. It's crazy. Right, Mick, now, is you a great historian for a bonfire, but take out your crystal ball. Where do you see it in 5 years' time? Any changes, developments? Or?
That is a question, actually, that a lot of the older bonfire boys do bring up. Where will we be in 5 years' time? Will we be 7 societies in the town? Will we be able to hold our event? Will it be a single event? Will it be something that's only done on private land? It's all up in the air. But the one thing that I would say in 5 years' time is whatever can be done will be done. And it will be done with all the enthusiasm and all the skills and all the qualities that have carried bonfire through the last 170 odd years.
How about membership? Is it on the increase or decrease or same?
There are 2 things in life no bonfire society talks about. One is how much it spends. Spends on its fireworks. There's all sorts of things like that. And the other is membership numbers. I would say, from my own experiences, that societies have probably stayed fairly static through the COVID period. We have to see. This year it's a Saturday. Next year it's a Saturday. Friday nights and Saturday nights are always far superior to Mondays to Thursdays.
Right.
So we just have to see.
Well, I think that it's something that, I came here in 1990, so I'm very much a runner in, as the Northern Irish would say. I'm a new boy as far as perhaps the bonfire societies and Louisians are concerned. But it is one thing that I've had people ask if they could come down and stay with us here and view and so on. And when they've gone away, they've been absolutely gobsmacked. And I am always gobsmacked by it. So I hope that in 10 years' time, perhaps after I've fallen off the roost, is that it is as good and as solid now then as it is now. I think it's important that it stays and that it's maintained. And it's people like you and your society that will help that. Right. Now, we have Stuart with a guest. What I want to ask you is, you've got to go and put some money in your meter, but how long can you spend with me this morning?
If I can just walk out of earsight, because I have to do it on the phone, I'll be back in about 3 minutes.
Well, okay. Well, I'm gonna bring them in and let them have their half hour, and then perhaps you could come back and join me if you're still here.
Absolutely love to. Yes.
Good, excellent. All right,
Okay.
let's yes, and we'll play a little something while we change. And can you get by me?
Yeah, that's it.
Let's see. Now I a number of things here that. Well, here's one: is visit Lewis. Let's go there first of all.
Good. You ready?
Good. Well, Stuart Dolby is supposed to be here. Listen to me shout, Stuart! Come on, quick! So you have to yell at these people. Otherwise, you get what we've got here. Dead air, as they call it. Dead air. That's what it's called. We'll try and fix that just for a minute or two. Here we are. That's like Lewis. You're on now. I've got a guess. I'll pass it all day. But a guess. Your show.
Right, here we are.
There you go.
Here we go. Should we start? Yeah.
Yes, you're live.
Okay, good morning. I'm Stuart Dorby, and today Stuart Dorby is in conversation with his lifelong friend and colleague, Philip Bowring. Philip is over from Hong Kong, and we are going to actually talk about our long friendship and our ventures over the years in terms of journalism. Philip, after Cambridge, you had a scholarship, Goldsmith scholarship, didn't you? To go in wandering in Africa, is that correct?
That's right. I spent a year, an academic year, supposedly doing research in Sudan, at the University of Khartoum. Although to be honest, I did very little research, but did a lot of traveling and interesting things, and went all over Sudan. And then after at the end of my time at the university, I spent some time in the southern Sudan, where the rebellion against northern rule was just beginning.
Let's be clear about this. Southern Sudan is where the Christians are. Northern Sudan is Muslim.
I mean, northern Sudan is basically Arabic speaking. Muslim. Southern Sudan is, it's partly Christian, it's partly
pagan.
Could
have a few pagan into the mix, haven't you?
Yeah.
And then you sent something off to the Observer.
And then which the foreigners thought was very good. Sorry, features editor thought was very good, and they were going to run very soon. But then it somehow didn't run, and by the time I got back to the UK, it still hadn't run. And I went to see them. I said, "What happened?" Well, Colin Legion, our Africa expert, so-called, didn't like it. He didn't think it accorded with his views on.
He thought he was the only person who knew about Africa, wasn't he? Yeah.
And of course, he'd never been to Southern Sudan. But eventually, they ran a sort of a truncated piece. So, 2,500 words came down to 500 or something of that sort, and it ran on the Observer Foreign News Service, which.
I love that. I love the Foreign News Service, which I used to write for as well. And you had most amazing headlines. It would have turned up in the Cleveland plain dealer in Cleveland, in the US of A. Or he came in the Christian Science Monitor, which had a sort of thing like Christian welcome to everyone, sort of all kinds of things. And then it turned up in Hong Kong and all over the flipping place. It was wonderful.
Anyway, that was my first kind of experience of newspapers and journalism, because it taught me something later when I became an editor myself. You have to rely on the people on the ground. You can't have editors telling you what you should write. You either rely on the people you've got or don't bother to have them, because otherwise there's no point. I think when I see some newsrooms today, I mean, you find that they'll spend their time watching what all the other news media are doing. So follow that or beat that. Instead of focusing more on their own original stories. But anyway, that was just a lesson that I thought I learned from that experience.
So how did you sort of progress from Africa to Asia?
Well, that's a long story too. I had a couple of sort of journalistic jobs in London, including working for the Investors Chronicle, weekly.
So you did.
I sort of talked my way into this job without really knowing anything about finance. But having got there, of course, I had to learn, which was very useful. I mean, to learn how to read a balance sheet and this sort of thing. And when I was there, through other people working there, I got an offer of a job in Australia to be started up Financial Weekly called Finance Week, which was to be earned partly by the Financial Times and partly by Rupert Murdoch. So it was a very curious.
Well, yeah, keep that to yourself. Now that was a sister public. See, the Financial Times had decided they wanted to rule the world. So at that stage, you see, the Financial Times was still a very, very parochial newspaper, a sort of financial sheet in the city that didn't really measure up to the Fleet Street giants, wasn't it, at that stage? Really, I mean, I can remember early in the days when I was made foreign news editor, which wasn't saying much because only had 1/2 a page of foreign news, so they decided, right. So they basically got involved in a magazine in Hong Kong called the Far East Economic Review. They had 1/3, didn't they?
Yeah, it was about 1/3.
Yeah, and then they had the one in Australia.
Well, that was a startup.
Yeah.
And then they had
one in South Africa.
They had the Financial Mail in South Africa,
which lasted.
But that was taken over. I mean, not very long after Finance Week started, there were all kinds of problems between the FT and Murdoch, and there was a printers' strike. And anyway, Murdoch then did a deal with Packer, the biggest other media boss in Australia, to take over. He took over the Telegraph, and Packer kept the Bulletin, which is a weekly magazine, and which Finance Week was some competition. So anyway, they all agreed in the end to close down Finance Week. At the same time, or very soon after, the Financial Times decided to sell out of the Far Eastern Economic Review. So that was about a year later.
No, was it? They sold at their interest.
I mean,
they didn't.
At the time that you left for.
Oh yeah, no. But the fact that right. At that time, what was going on? I was sort of a junior on the foreign desk in London, and the editor there was Gordon Newton, and he was very, very elitist. And all the people who were on the foreign desk, they used to put ads in the Telegraph saying, if you've got an Oxbridge first, there's a job for you at the Financial Times. So on the foreign desk was four Oxbridge people. And somehow I managed to wangle my way in, because I got a job on the Financial Times as a researcher, if you believe it or not. After I was at Sussex University, I went to London. I didn't have a job, so I was labouring, doing the job as labour. And on the labour side, there was a copy of the Telegraph, which I never ever read. Anyway, I picked it up and I saw an ad which said, "Researcher wanted for Financial Times library. Must be a graduate. Editorial prospects." And I didn't know at that time that I've got ADHD, but I actually thought I keep on talking to the other side guy gets in. So I talked my way into the job. And so I became a researcher in the thing, which wasn't really a researcher. It was somebody who took the files around and made the tea for the Anyway, I used to look at, there's a column in the Financial Times called the Lex column, which is its premier column, right? You listen, and premier column. And I used to look over the shoulder of these big giants and I said, "Are you quite sure about that price range?" And they came up to me one day and they said, "Would you like a job in the companies department?" Because it wasn't a newsroom in the Financial Times. The company department was the newsroom, wasn't it, basically? And I was writing about companies and, the company results and all the rest of it. When Gordon Newton made me editor of the Plantation Shares column. This was because in those days there were lots of plantation companies in Malaysia, rubber, and Sri Lanka, tea, yeah? And I discovered in my work that these companies had lots of assets. For example, they had along the Thames, they had what's known as go-downs, like warehouses for the tea and the rubber and all the rest of it, which were worth a great deal of money. Secondly, it turned out that terms of trade turned against rubber and tea, and therefore the companies were underestimated, and that meant that asset strippers who were around that time, Jim Slater was one of them. He decided to asset strip all these companies, and he made a problem. Following this, Jim Slater decided to go to Asia, and at the same time, the editor of the Far East Economic Review, which was the one that FT had over there, was looking for somebody like that. This is the letter I got. Really, it was saying that, right, thank you for your letter. I've written to JDF Jones, who's the foreign editor, Alan Hare, and all these kind of people, and said we are asking the Financial Times, as one of the owners, to do our recruiting for us on our behalf, right? Seeing to recruit on our behalf, one of which will be the new business editor. In other words, we are seeking Financial Crimes to do our recruiting for us. Anyway, Newton had actually been, the great Newton was founder of Financial Times, really. He knew about tea, I think, because he'd been commodities fitter. So he said, he looked at all these Oxford people, and he looked at me and he says, would you like to have a job in Hong Kong with the business editor and so forth? So I had this interview with Derek and I got the job. And then I spent my time about a month going around Asia, and then I ended up in Hong Kong. And there was an awful lot to actually do as a business editor, because the Hang Seng Index was in its infancy and it was all over the flipping place. So I started doing stories about the big Hongs, the big trading companies, and so on and so forth. And I got to know Philip by, over that time. And I decided I wanted to go off to Vietnam to be a war correspondent. So I did that. And then Derek said to Philip, would you like to come and be business editor in Hong Kong? So that's how our relationships began to flourish, didn't it? And that was it.
Yeah, so I arrived in Hong Kong in April 1973, and Stuart went off to fight the wars in Vietnam and Cambodia.
And come out to, so forth. So it was really good. But then, as time went on, you did very well in
I did okay with the FT, with the review, and then I had falling out with Derek Davis, and I went back to the FT for a while, based in Hong Kong, really covering everything from Pakistan to Korea. I mean, I was hardly ever in Hong Kong in those days. It was.
But I remember in those days, you and I used to go around Asia, didn't we? Like scavengers almost. Scavenging.
Yeah, I mean, when the review was based in Hong Kong, it was mostly about Southeast Asia rather than about Hong Kong. So.
I used to go to Japan and
yeah. I mean, there were all places you could go, but it was. I mean, the readership was actually mainly in Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong. Also, we go to Thailand, Philippines.
But also, you and I used to meet up in Philippines, didn't we? Because I'd come up from Vietnam, and you'd go to the Philippines sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, Philippines always fascinates me.
We just written a book about it, yes. But it did me as well, because it was such a strange, what was the famous phrase for it? It was a Spanish colony for 400 years, wasn't it? And then it was the first American, I think only American colony that the Americas ever had.
That was serious. Yeah, I mean, it's.
And there was 50 years of that. So they said about Philippines, it was 400 years in the convent and 50 years in Chicago.
Well, except they never really were in the convent. One of the interesting things about the Philippines from that aspect is that although it is very superficially Catholic, and people go to mass, and they, all kinds of saints are venerated, and the Virgin Mary, and Mother, and so on.
Yeah.
but actually, sexual realities are very different. Very different. I mean, throughout the history, I've written a book about it. I mean, the 50% or more of births have been out of wedlock. I mean, that's just the way it is, and that's the way it remains. And the early Spanish priests, I mean, they used to write. They wrote a lot about what was happening, back in the 17th century or even earlier. And they would say that how competent the Filipinos were in boat building and in agriculture and so on. But the biggest problem, as far as the priests were concerned, was sex. It was everywhere, and they couldn't control it.
Because they're Catholics, weren't they? Yeah. And there were Muslims down in the south, Mindanao. Yeah.
Well, yes, but the Spanish never really ruled Mindanao, or they didn't rule the Muslim parts of Mindanao, and they didn't really rule the rest of it. I mean, Mindanao was developed very, very late. It was very sparsely populated, really, until it's only the last 100 years we've had huge migration of.
Well, I remember. Do you remember John Nance, the American journalist, who wrote that book about the Tarzan Day, the Stone Age tribe?
Oh yeah, but that was all rubbish.
That was all. I used to love going to the Philippines because the Americans had a base there along the Po, didn't they?
Yeah, well,
and it was like Dodge City, wasn't it? Mud in the street, gunfights in the street, and of course all the Americans go on what's known as R&R, research and rest, which is usually going to the
rest and recreation.
Rest and recreation.
Mostly consists of picking up bar girls.
Bar girls, yeah. I mean, well, what was it in Bangkok? The rest and recreation was on a street called Pat Pong, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, Pat Pong's still there. I mean, Pat Pong moved from entertaining American forces to entertaining tourism.
All the brothels and bars in you had to leave your gun at the door, didn't you?
Well, the Philippines, not in Thailand. But,
what was it? Well, sidearms must be worn, but
well, yeah, all that got changed. I mean, that was the first thing that actually did change when Marcos seized power in the coup in 1972.
But Marcos, him and his wife were sort of variety show, weren't her with their shoes and all the rest.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, but it wasn't much fun.
And also, it's not today. For example, I was talking to a Filipino lady at the bus stop the other day, and she said that she was a nurse originally, but now she was in domestic involvement. Talked about Aquino and all the other prisoners, and I said, "Do you send money back to Philippines?" She said all the time.
Yeah,
because it is a remittance economy, isn't it? All those wonderful nurses over here send all the money back, and that's what keeps Philippines going. Really.
Well, there's 100 million people, and they just don't produce enough food and other things to for themselves. So their only way to survival is export of labor, and therefore the remittances that come from labor export. And there's a lot here, very helpful. But I mean, there's huge numbers in the US and Canada. Throughout the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and those kind of places, and quite a lot in Southeast Asia as well, in Hong Kong. I mean, there's 300,000 in Hong Kong. There's probably a similar number in Singapore. So these add up.
When over the years though, so you lived in Hong Kong, you made your life there, you married there, and you've got the children there. I think you were actually chairman of the Foreign Correspondents Club at one stage, which is a real recommendation.
No, actually, I was president of it. President. Yeah, on 2 occasions. Second occasion was not, but I was sort of dragooned into it because nobody else would do it, and there was a crisis on something.
For our viewers, I mean, you see that press clubs in Britain don't usually work for one reason, but in places like Hong Kong and Japan and Washington, the foreign correspondence clubs are very important constitutions, which have very important members and people coming to speak there and all that kind of thing, you know. And that was really quite a place. I mean, if you go to Japan, you've actually got to go there. Apart from anything else, nobody could speak Japanese. And also, of course, you remember that back in those days, the foreign journalists, particularly the Americans, would come up from Vietnam for a bit of a rest, wouldn't they? So forth and so on.
Yeah, I mean, in Hong Kong, the Foreign Correspondence Club was lucky enough to get a lease on an old
dairy farm,
old building. That was 40 years ago, and they've still got it. Although the lease is subject to government renewal, and it's circumstances in Hong Kong have changed, and you know, Hong Kong is not the free city that it used to be in terms of journalists. And,
but what I mean, it's a very funny, finer place. You've got the Guilos, there was a structure with the three big trading companies. They used to bring in very, you know, posh people from London, and then there were lots of Australian people, weren't there?
Well,
and so forth. And,
yes, but I mean, you know, that was, you know, we're talking about 45, 50 years
ago. Well, I'm talking about when we were there.
But I was there. I was there until 4 days ago. So.
I'm trying to sort of go through it.
I realise that, but you know, I've seen the place through this 50-year or nearly 50-year.
But I mean, you were very happy there, weren't you? Really?
Well, I mean, I had interesting work, and I got married there, and children were born there, and so on. And then my wife, who was also a journalist, worked for Agence France Presse, among others, and then later went into politics and ended up in jail. So,
well, that's what we might talk to, and it's a rather delicate issue.
Well, I don't mind talking about it here. I wouldn't talk about it publicly in Hong Kong. But,
well, I think most viewers will know that there's been turmoil in Hong Kong because the mainland are now trying to actually take away the sort of quasi democracy that Chris Patton had managed to impose. I mean, lots of people say that we gave Hong Kong away, but would you subscribe to that?
Well, no, I wouldn't. But I mean, I think the problem is for a long time after the handover in 1997, things continued pretty much as before, and there was no significant interference by Beijing. But things began to change. I would say, basically, when Xi Jinping came to power, that's 10 years ago. And you've seen since then the rise of nationalism in China, of Xi Jinping's devotion to trying to expand Chinese influence around the world, his attempt to take the South China Sea away from the other neighboring countries, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, even a bit of Indonesia. So things have changed quite a lot, and in particular over the last 2 years, when China imposed something called the National Security Law, which is a very vaguely worded document under which people can be charged with subversion for doing anything to undermine the government by seriously criticizing or trying to have an election. So elections now, which were once reasonably free, although business groups had dominance, but popularly elected seats, it was free. All that's come to an end, and now there is a sort of legislature still exists, but you have to be approved to stand for election. So you have to be approved by the government to stand So it needs to say the only people who are approved are those who are not going to criticize it more than very marginally. So it's now a completely rubber stamp legislature. Anyway, my wife had been a legislator, a democratically elected one, and she was one of 47 people picked up in nearly 2 years ago in January. And they've been on remand in jail ever since. And the case has yet to come up for hearing. So the whole thing is just sort of dragged out and keeping all these people in jail on remand. So that's a situation with my wife, Claudia Mo.
What is it? What are the conditions in jail?
The conditions in jail aren't too bad. I mean, it's still, the jail still operates under sort of rules laid down in British times. So it's not, the jail itself is not exceptionally awful.
And you're allowed to visit quite often.
Yeah, I mean, because she's on remand.
Is it way up in the what's it?
Yeah, I mean it's right up on the border, so it's a difficult place to get to. But you can go visit quite often. As I say, she's on remand because she hasn't been convicted because they simply haven't had the trial. They just get them and they're saying they're still doing investigations.
You were telling me about sort of British legislature or British judges or something that have been involved.
Well, Hong Kong has a court of so-called final appeal. It is not actually final appeal because if a case goes against the government and the court of final appeal, they can still take it to Beijing, to the National People's Congress. So your chances of winning any political case in the Court of Final Appeal, or ultimately, the MPC, are basically zero in a political case where you're up against the government. And this is obviously a problem if you've been accused of some very vague charges, as in cases of 47, where accused of conspiracy to subvert the government, whatever that may mean, and things like conspiring with foreign forces. Well, my wife is married to me, so I'm a foreign force by definition. And she, being a journalist who's very fluent in English, used to give a lot of interviews to Bloomberg and the FT and Australian Broadcasting, these sort of organizations, and that has sort of meant that she is seen as helping foreign forces intervene in Hong Kong affairs. So this.
God, it breaks my heart, Philip. It breaks my heart. I can remember every summer you would come across with your children and my children, and we would go to Alfriston and the Bluebell Railway, and it was such a joy, wasn't it? And I always remember seeing your son Gavin when I saw him on one of your pictures, and I said, "Do you remember?" No, I thought it was son. I said, "Do you remember when you were playing pool? I think you were 14 in the Elephant and Castle pub, and then one of the barmen caught you smoking in the loo." And Simon said, "It wasn't me, it was Gavin."
Yeah, well, that's
and I said to Gavin, "Was it you?" "Yes," he said. I put my hands up. And it was such a nice sort of break for both families, wasn't it? Yeah. So now, was it difficult getting out to come to the UK?
Well, I mean, it's been difficult to get out because Hong Kong has had this quarantine situation for a long time. I mean, it's been locked down for much longer than any other city outside of mainland China. So, I was determined I wasn't going to travel if I had to do 3 weeks quarantine in a hotel on return on my own. So but I figured by about sort of middle of October, they probably would have to get rid of this. So now, and in fact, they did at the beginning, at the end of last month. So there's still some restrictions when you go back, but it's only kind of having constant COVID tests. But at least you can now go back and without having to go through quarantine and so on. But of course, now people can at last go and come from Hong Kong. It's very difficult to get flights because Cathay Pacific Airways, which is Hong Kong's airline, they park their planes in deserts and sacked a lot of their staff, and now they can't easily restart the schedules. And a lot of other airlines, I mean, Virgin stopped flying to Hong Kong. So did and Lufthansa and others. I mean, who used to regard Hong Kong as a hub, stopped using it because they couldn't. So a lot of that kind of traffic, which used to use Hong Kong, simply moved to Singapore or Bangkok or Seoul, or there are plenty of other airports in the region which are perfectly usable and have got good connections with other parts of Asia. So Hong Kong has lost out very badly from maintaining these restrictions far longer than any of the neighbors except mainland China. So Hong Kong's position as an international center has undoubtedly suffered significantly. And a lot of financial people, and they bring so much business to Hong Kong. I mean, they don't like the idea of being stuck there, and they can't. And if they go away to do business,
they can't do a deal.
Yeah. So why would you stay there if you can move to some other place where you're freer to move around? And so that's what's happened. And of course, this is at the same time that the national security law hasn't directly affected many foreigners, although there's some, particularly lecturers at universities in subjects, like history of sociology, politics, that sort of thing. They find their contracts not being renewed. But the other thing, of course, you have a huge exodus of middle-class Hong Kong Chinese there's quite a lot coming here. Coming here, Canada, Australia, the US. So there's been a significant contraction in the population of Hong Kong, and that's mainly affected this sort of middle class. These are not rich people, but the people.
But there's also maybe from England, but also a lot from Hong Kong. There are agencies, British agencies in China and Hong Kong, I suspect, who say, I can get your children into a private school. I can get you, in fact, Sussex University is culpable in this. They have got a huge bloody content of Chinese students. Some of them can't even speak English because an agency actually says, I can get you into Sussex University. And you see them all around the place. They're very nice, but
But I mean, a lot of those are the mainland Chinese. I'm talking about the
Hong Kong ones.
The Hong Kong people who come here on a Hong Kong British passport, which still exists, of course. And even if you didn't have one, you could still apply for one if you were born in Hong Kong under British rule. You were still entitled to a BNO passport. British National Overseas Passport, and those used not to be able to come here and work, but now the government here changed the rules, because of what was happening in Hong Kong, in enabling them to come here, and after, if they work for 5 years, they can get proper British passport, right of residence, and so on. And of course, the countries which traditionally have a lot of migration, like Canada and Australia, I mean, they've been lapping up, Hong Kong, educated Hong Kong people because, they're keen to
right,
be-
yeah,
and Canada and Australia in particular, they already have big, Hong Kong origin populations.
There's a big
So,
diaspora of Vietnamese as well in those countries.
Well, but the Vietnamese thing is kind of a bit from the past.
Past,
Well,
yeah,
this
sure,
is something
yeah.
which has
Happening now,
been
yeah.
regenerated. I mean, there's been waves before, but this latest wave is now, and it's still going on. I mean, and of
Well,
course,
Philip, let me ask you two final questions. You've got very distinguished ancestry, and I was wondering if it's affected your life in Hong Kong and your values about all things. Philip's, was it great-great-grandfather?
well, no, it's actually it's not direct. He was cousin 4 times removed. So,
Like
yeah. So
anyway,
complicated.
the cousin 4 times removed of his great-great-great-grandfather was governor of Hong Kong.
Yes, he was, but he wasn't. I mean, he was originally a merchant and then a literary figure
And a free trader, and a
polymath.
polymath,
I mean, and he
and
he was MP for Bolton, and he supported the abolition of the Corn Laws, and he was a chartist too. So,
he was
so
very But also, what about the things he did do? He actually got a treaty with King Mongkut.
King Mongkut,
Well, actually, King and I, you see.
No, he was.
But the thing is that this man, a distant relative, he sent a boat up the Pearl River and started off the first opium war with the Chinese.
Second
opium war with Chinese. So you kept that to yourself.
Well, no, it's quite well known, but it was, it was a bit strange that he, who was an anti-imperialist, sort of got involved in this imperialist action. On the other hand, in some aspects of his governorship in Hong Kong, I mean, he tried to have an elected council, and he wasn't allowed by London. He was a Unitarian, so he sort of was out of sorts with the British establishment of Anglicans and so on. So he wasn't. He was quite popular with the Chinese, but not with the
the British.
With the British, yes.
The British Hongs.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, his treaty with Thailand was actually very important, historically
because it brought it into the modern age. Didn't it?
That's right.
Yeah. Modern age as well as it.
And I mean, he then became King Mongkut's ambassador in Europe.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, and he represented the king for several years.
What was he? He was Rama IV, wasn't he?
Rama IV.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it was interesting, but I mean, he was a man of his time.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody born, just after the,
What are you doing?
just after the French Revolution, just after the American Revolution. So he was himself a sort of quasi-revolutionary who believed in.
It's not been muted, has it?
No, we're just running out of battery, that's all.
Believed in popular education and things like that.
Yeah.
So, which he started in Hong Kong. I mean, he wasn't a very effective governor because administration wasn't really his thing. But he had, and the people he had to work with were pretty rum lot.
Absolute rum lot, mate.
But yeah, I mean, when I went to Hong Kong, I knew almost nothing about this.
Yeah.
But eventually, I wrote a book about him, but
I know that's
not
a very
much
good
of it
book.
was, not much of it was about Hong Kong. It was really about his other activities before that. And
Well, I
to some
remember
extent after
I was party to you getting that book published. I encouraged
Yeah,
you
I
to
know.
write that book, didn't I?
Yeah, it's very true. Yes,
Yeah,
and
And then you've
yeah.
done 2 books. You've done that wonderful book, of course, the Empire of the Wind, about the populations of the archipelagos in the Pacific and the trading. But it was a very good book. And now you've done the Philippines.
Yeah, well,
Which
I mean,
one?
it's been nice to sort of have a change of
Yeah.
direction after years of journalism and
And then,
Yeah.
like me, you're going to do your biography.
well, yeah, I mean, I keep thinking about it. And make a few, write a few bits, but I don't know
I can
whether
tell
I
you,
come and
I can
completely together.
I tell you, I'm having the time of my life on this.
Yeah.
Part 1, you don't have to do much research.
Well,
it just comes out.
comes out well.
Yeah,
That's true.
But it's quite interesting. So finally, one last question. Our young cameraman here, who is very, very bright, but has got some very dodgy views in my view, and he wants to know whether you think the Chinese are going to militarily invade Taiwan. And I said, well, I've been writing about this for 50 years, and I've always believed that China's bark is bigger than its bite. And I don't think they've had any reason, basically, ultimately, to take over Taiwan. Because, Taiwan's got all the, well, I suppose they've got all the chip book business, but what's the point? It doesn't seem,
well, I mean, you got asked the same question: what's the point for Putin invading Ukraine? Obviously, I think China. I mean, Xi Jinping would very much like to kind of end his career by getting hold of Taiwan, which has actually only been Chinese for 200 years out of China's
1600.
Yeah. But I think his military must realize how difficult it would be. At least in the immediate future, but by which I mean 10, 15 years. I mean, it's very difficult to tell what's going to happen.
What with the Americans?
Well, not just the Americans. You got the Japanese, you got the Koreans. A lot of people have got an interest in Taiwan staying as it is.
Yeah.
The Japanese above all. And also the Southeast Asians. Look, I mean, the Taiwan. You can see from the southern tip of Taiwan, you can see the northern islands of the Philippines.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Luzon Strait is absolutely, crucial for world shipping.
Yeah.
So,
yes,
nobody wants to see the Chinese control both sides of the Luzon Strait as well as both sides of the Taiwan Strait, because that makes the South.
Well, of course, and you've
got
all the tankers taking oil up to Japan.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the other countries simply cannot afford to have China making the South China Sea into a Chinese lake.
Yeah.
Because they're all dependent on being able to access it in both directions.
Well, you've got this problem with the paracel ice, haven't you?
Well, yeah, but those are minor things, but they're indications of. I mean, China claims almost the whole South China Sea, but the claim is, historically, is preposterous. And you've got, some substantial countries. There's nowhere like anything like as China, but I mean, Indonesia's got 260 million people. Philippines is 100 million. Vietnam's 100 million, and these people are more or less kind of opposed to China. They don't have much in the way of arms, but they know where their long-term interests are. And for China, what's the point? I mean, the threats to China have almost always come from its northern and western borders, and it almost certainly will again, because their biggest problem is with their minorities on the Tibetans and the Uyghurs and the Kazakhs in Xinjiang.
The Uyghurs. Didn't the Vietnamese actually take over China in the 16th century for a while? One of their biggest emperors, I think.
Well, no, it was the Manchus. The Qing dynasty in China was a Manchu I mean, the Manchus conquered China.
Yeah.
So the Qing dynasty was a Manchu, dynasty, and for a long time, I mean, Manchu was the official language, not Han-Chinese. So and Chinese demography. In China, have a large and expanding population, but you see that's all changed. China has now got a population which is going to decline very rapidly and get old very, very rapidly. So that changes the dynamics.
That's the one child policy.
That's the one child policy.
So there's a load of men who are actually not going to get married.
Well, yeah, and there's a great reluctance. I mean, the birth rate last year was, I think, 1.2 or something. So that the fertility rate 1.2. Well, you needs to be 2.1 to actually just replace, and they can't have immigration of any significant amount simply because China's too big, and anyway, they don't want to be marrying Bangladeshis or.
Yeah. Well, I was at university, and one of my Chinese students, we were talking about energy, about all other things, and she said, "But Stuart, you've got to remember, in everything there were so many of us.
Well,
it's not just energy or what and so forth. And that's rather a good point, isn't it?
Well, there's so many, but the number is diminishing.
Right. Philip, that was a wonderful talk. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you, Sir, for inviting me. It's delightful to be here. So.
Well, some fascinating facts and figures about modern Hong Kong, and a little bit about Stuart Dolby's past again. As a man of many parts, and this was his stint in Hong Kong. And thank you very much for his guest, who gives not only an insight into the past of Hong Kong, but also what's going on there at the moment. And I think that we don't get enough information because there are too many other volatile parts of the world. So it was a fascinating interview. Now, I don't know what's happened to it. Where's Mickey?
Just in time.
You can actually see the top of the Philippines.
Right, here we go. Okay. Here we go. We got Mick back. Right, Mick, we were talking an hour ago about the bonfire. So undoubtedly the audience has changed considerably. So give us a little update on what's happening this year.
Well, of course, we're rolling through to a magnificent Saturday evening's celebration in Lewes. We're all looking. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to it, and I know that our society is looking forward to it. My biggest concern is we seem to be on target to have everything done. Normally, there's got to be at least one last-minute panic or two. It wouldn't be right without that, and everything's magically smoothing its way along. And yes, it is the one night of the year that Lewes really comes alive and sets itself apart from the rest of the world.
Right, and that is actually on Saturday, the November the 5th.
Yep.
Always on November the 5th, unless it's on a Sunday, is that right?
That's correct.
So that was your remark that next year it'll be on a Saturday again.
Yes, it's next year is also a Saturday, and these are basically the Friday nights and Saturday nights are the ones we really enjoy. we can have a really good celebration, and that we've got time to clear up and get things underway and recover the following day. Weekdays, they're never quite the Monday to Fridays. They're never Monday to Thursdays. They're never quite as busy as the weekend jobs.
Now, you made reference to, and I'm aware that the establishment are hopping up and down because of the closure of roads and trains and so on and so forth. But in fact, the celebration itself doesn't come out of the public purse. It is the bonfire societies that raise all the money.
Each of the societies raise the money for their own event. Yes, they do. The town, the local council, district council, do pay for some crowd security, and obviously the policing comes out the public purse. And every year there'd be the question: is the policing commensurate with what actually is really needed? The number of bobbies that will be in the town can appear to be quite high, whereas one particular bonfire meeting, the Saturday in fact before Her Majesty's funeral, up at Mayfield, there was not a policeman to be seen. Normally a bonfire night like that, which is of course nowhere near the size of Lewis, would probably not have more than 3 or 4 PCs and a few PCSOs. In Lewis, by tradition, the police swamp the place, but that's down to them. We do not comment on how the police actually police the public, because that is entirely their responsibility.
But no fireworks are paid for out of the public purse.
No, not a thing.
No costumes. No, it's all done by the bonfire societies.
Absolutely, everything is done by the bonfire societies, and more importantly, not only do they raise the money throughout the year to be able to have their event, a significant amount of money is raised for charity as well.
Right. Where does it come from? Where does the money come from?
It can come from things traditionally like jumper sales.
Right.
Whenever you see around the town an advert, and I try to put them on Lewis Present for all the societies, whether they're having a coffee morning, whether they're having a jumble sale morning, whether they're having a table sale or a little Sunday market somewhere. And particularly in the summer, they all have their baits or their proms in the park. These are the main fundraisers. And also, I think all the bonfire societies, but certainly we do, can offer bars. And they go out and they'll be seen doing bars at various functions all around the county. And if anyone has the need of a bar, you can't ask better than the bonfire society. They have the experience, they have the personal license holders, they have the equipment. And these are good fundraisers.
Oh yeah, that's it. I hadn't realised that. Yeah. But also on the night you shake a few tins, don't you?
We do indeed. Every single society will have the buckets out there, and we try and make the public remember this is the greatest free show they can come to. It's totally free. They pay nothing. If they want to enter a fireside, yes, they pay. But if they want to stand on the street, it is free. We ask them to be generous. We ask them to put their money in the bins.
And indeed, the public are quite generous, I think, aren't they?
They are. They are. It's quite astounding how much can be raised throughout the bonfire season at all the various outfires, as we call them, or out meetings, and how much is raised in Lewis. In Lewis, the people could be a damn sight more generous. I've got to be honest. They don't come here with piles of change to throw it in, whereas at all the other meetings, it can be quite astounding.
Yeah. Now, tell me, are you going to suffer because more and more people are using cards rather than cash?
No, not at all. I think that probably all the societies have moved over to their wonderful little card readers. We've all got our little sum ups.
Right.
£16, I think they were at Tool Station for card readers. And I know we've certainly got a load for our society. They cost us nothing. when they're not being used, and it's a straightforward minor percentage.
Right.
So it makes it convenient, and any form of reduction in cash handling is actually helpful. The more that goes on a card, the more accountability you've got.
Yeah. Well, I must say that we got quite irritated yesterday because a few of us went over to Ask, actually, on the corner there. And after the meal, went to pay in cash, and they wouldn't take it. They'd only take a card. Now, that seems to me to be naughty.
Right. I have very, very strict views on this one, and that is cash is king. Any company that will not take cash, I've got to be very suspicious of, because I think it's insulting.
Yes.
On the other hand, I also have a problem with those that won't take a card, who have those little signs up saying cash only, and you've got to wonder, well, what's your problem, mate? Why can't you get a bank account? Who is it you don't want to know you're selling your fish and chips to?
Well, let me say this: you and I are very much the same mind, and we were quite, let's put it bluntly, pissed off at the thing. And the discussion was, should we ever go back there again? And I think that the retailers, particularly on the high street, who are always crying the blues, should actually think about the customer and not their own convenience.
Yep.
And the trouble is, of course, is the computer running it from bloody head office.
Well, we are getting more and more places that are card only. And I have a friend who actually has 3 bars, and they are strictly card only. And his argument is that firstly, he hasn't got to worry about the security of his cash. Secondly, he's got complete accountability. But it is discriminatory. And in a country that we try and be as non-discriminatory as we can, as equal as we can, it seems very strange, a bit of an anathema, that we're now going to discriminate people that haven't got or do not wish to have, for whatever reason, a card.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is interesting because Melissa Conti, who does our a program with us on a Friday from New York, and is a former broadcaster. In fact, she and I work together on morning business report, the PBS Coast to Coast business program in the States. She now works for Templeton Trust, which is a very big name in American financial circles. Says she will not have a credit card, and her advice to people is don't have a credit card because it gets you into more trouble. So she would have real problems over here trying to get something to eat.
Yes, well, certainly I'd ask.
Right. Now, here's a little something where we pull tweak the tail of the power companies, and then I'm going to come back and ask you about a couple of things to do with our present situation.
Well done, the energy companies. They're full of bright ideas to help their customers. Now they've made power so expensive that for an average house such as this, you can't afford to heat it. So you don't need appliances such as this. But that means you also don't need a fridge, because you can keep your groceries cool and fresh without it. The house is cold enough. Well done, chaps.
The Max, the mighty Max is in, knocking everything over. And normally he says to me, yeah, be careful, be careful, be careful. And he came in and disrupted the whole bloody thing. Good morning, Max.
Good morning.
Right. Now, do you want to take over the directorship?
Yep, I can do that. I'm just lurking in the background.
Yeah, okay. Now, Mick, you said that there are a couple of businesses that you feel keenly should get a little plug. And so go ahead.
Yes, obviously we all keep an eye on the high street, and when we lose a business from the high street, it's whether I support it or not, it's a loss to the community. And we've recently seen the Roundhill, the vegan restaurant in the Needlemakers has ceased trading, and a new business has now taken over. But what we have seen in Lewes, which has in recent years had quite a wide range of ethnic food, we have two Korean restaurants or two Korean food outlets. One is the Big Fish in Fisher Street, which for many, many years has been a fish and chip shop, but they are now offering, alongside fish and chips, a wide range of sushi and Korean street food. And I have to say that their photographs that they put in Lewes Present every week are absolutely stunning. The food is mouth-watering, and the comments that are coming back from those that have ordered from there are absolutely top rate. So I think more people should have a little look by the Big Fish or look online and do an online order, because it clearly is a additional range of food to Lewes that is proving popular. And most recently, we have, having lost the Round Hill, which was the first.
Yeah. Just before you go on to that, let me say, I went in to get some fish and chips, and there was nobody else in there. And I had a chat to this new chap because I am not a sushi fan.
Right.
My idea of Japanese food is teriyaki and sukiyaki, sort of nice, hot, bubbling type things. But we had quite a chat, and he seems to be a very enterprising young man, a very pleasant young man, and he knows what he's doing. And I'm delighted for you to report back to me that he's doing well.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Well, of course, the next one is Cafe Bigu, which is in the High Street opposite the Barbican House, opposite the castle. And that is a sit-down, dine-in vegan food, Korean vegan food. So again, we're looking forward to seeing lots of reviews of the place and seeing how their food comes across. But it is an interesting option that is now available on the High Street.
Well, I've been in there too. I poked my nose in just to say hello. They seem very nice, polite people. I'm always interested in Vietnamese food because, it's been 4 or 5 years ago now that I was in Washington. But I was amazed that the Vietnamese have taken over almost all the delis there.
They're Korean.
Oh, they're Korean, right? Okay. Well,
but carry on.
That's the same.
Same thing. Yeah.
But one of the interesting things is the way you pay is by weight. You
right.
put your stuff into a brown paper bag and they weigh it, and that's how they charge you.
Well.
But anyway, is they're Korean here. We wish them very well. But can I also say that I said to them, listen, you're new, and what we have is we have a standing offer to anybody on the high street that they can pop in any morning and come and sit down. We don't ask for appointments or anything. We integrate all sorts of things. Is they can sit down and they can say who they are, what they're doing, what they offer, and please come and join us. And we don't charge anything for that. That's just so that we can let people know what's going on in the town. Do you know we haven't had one take up yet?
That doesn't surprise me, in all honesty. But anyway, I whilst I'm going on about the two that we now have, and this lovely, both of them being Korean, of course, we've seen the demise, the passing, not through any fault of their own, of Zoo.
Yes.
And Zoo came to Lewes, it set up, it was a success. It was far more than just going along and eating. It was a community they created. And they of course, were at the bus station, that lovely edifice that is under much discussion, but is currently now closed, completely closed.
Can I make another comment about that? Because with some of the help from Stephen Catlin, but I looked at the objections. I mean, there are 850 objections, and actually, much as I have a go at all politicians, the objection from Lewes Town Council was very articulate.
They were.
And very well laid out. And of course, everybody's broken every bloody rule about this thing. But, the one thing that I've said, and I've only had 2 people take me up on it, is this company is subject, as everybody else is, to a certain element of CSR, corporate social responsibility. You look on its website, It keeps telling us how wonderful it is, but it has no CSR and it has no director in charge of CSR, which is a requirement. And yet they are so wonderful. How the hell did they get their hands on this thing in the first place?
Well, they got it simply because they got the money and the opportunity came up to buy it. And I think that it's a case of the councils have been sleeping on the job. It's a very difficult one because it's not the town council or the district council's responsibility to look out at property like that. But of course, it's their responsibility to deal with the fallout.
Yes.
So it's not until it's gone, it's missed.
Yes.
So we have a historic problem where developers can buy and sell property all the way around, and all that the councils can do is keep a weather eye on what is legitimate business. It's when you suddenly realise that the town is at risk of losing a central transport hub, and it's not about the building itself, it's about the purpose of the land that is there.
Yes.
The bus station building, I quite like the look of it. I think it's a lovely bit of modernist 1950s building, to be fair.
Yeah.
And when it functioned, and it had parcel offices, it had space and canteens for the staff and everything else, the restaurants, the news agents and everything. It was a community. And okay, we can't live in the past on that. It's got to serve the future. And that's where the dynamics change. What is the future? The future is distinctly not loads and loads of motor vehicles. It's not even loads and loads of electric vehicles either. The future has to be efficient, affordable, and energy efficient public transport. That's it.
Yeah.
It
has
to run from somewhere.
Yeah. The other thing is that we keep on being told of communities dying, and then we take up every possible spot where there was once a thriving business, probably businesses that attracted people in to talk and so on and so forth, with houses. Soon this entire high street will be houses. You've got no infrastructure. Where the hell are they going to have any sort of communication with one another? And then we'll all be crying that nobody talks to each other. Communities are dying. It's crazy. Where are our leaders?
In the break between our earlier online tete-a-tete, I went outside and took a look in Charlie Wycherley's window. And Charlie Wycherley of the family that have been estate agents in this town for, I think, 3 generations. And it is astounding. And there I was looking, and a lady came along whose name I won't mention, but is well known. And she said, "No wonder nobody can afford to buy anything here." And we were looking at a couple of very well-known properties in the town, and their prices are in above the million. And a nice little 3-4 bed terraced house there needs renovation, just under 600,000. And we've got this thing where, yes, everywhere is going to housing. It's all going to flats. Build them wherever you can. But who can afford to buy them?
Exactly.
I've got a granddaughter who's 21 next month, 21. Very eager to get on the property ladder, but it's almost going out of reach.
Yes.
Every single month,
yes,
they save a little bit of money. There's more going in the pot for the deposit. They've looked at the joint ownership where you own half, rent half, and all this sort of thing. Lewis is a victim of its own success.
Well, I don't know that it is success, because my argument is those people that are elected to the 650 are so busy worrying about whether the boss had an ice cake and half a bottle of champagne when he shouldn't have at Christmas, that they've taken the eye off the ball for all sorts of social amenities and social problems. They're not interested in that anymore. So as a consequence, everything's rampant.
Well, it is, but it's very difficult to say to somebody who bought a house for 500,000 that they're now selling for 7,500,000. So they're part of the problem. Admittedly, they're looking at their profit. They are, of course, simply the next place they buy going to give somebody else their profit, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, but you say profit, you see, and it is interesting that, because I worked for Reuters for a decade, as you know, And I can remember in the early part of the 1990s is actually some journalists coming and saying, my mother has got a house, and when she bought it, it was worth whatever it was then, let's say £200,000, and now it's only worth 175,000. And my answer is if she brought it to be in the property market, then she must learn the rules of markets. They go up and down.
Well, it's quite fascinating how the European market is, because in France, for instance, buy a property there, 10 years later, you'll probably only get your money back, because there's not the rampant inflation, and it's not looked upon as the great asset that property is here.
Yeah.
Germany, very high proportion of rental out there.
Yes.
Very,
right.
very high proportion of rental.
That's
Affordable rental as well.
Yeah.
We haven't got affordable rental here. That's where the first problem comes along. It's not there. We haven't got affordable housing, and we're not building enough social housing.
Absolutely.
And down at the bus station, the plans down there's nothing included for social housing.
Yeah.
And what they would normally do is simply say, well, we can't afford the project is not affordable if we do that. But we give you X amount of money that you can to the council, and you can go and build some social housing somewhere else. Well,
I mean, perhaps we have got to get a little bit tougher. Perhaps people should have, what is called a listed building, where you can only do so much to it. Perhaps we should have listed buildings that are protected. That ownership is a fair price to be paid by the state, but no more than that, and you can't sell it privately.
Well, in France, actually, if the mayor of a commune or a village or a town puts an offer in on a compulsory purchase, actually just simply writes one up and puts it in, the property can't be sold on the open market for 5 years. And the mayor of Honfleur, some years ago, I was involved with people who had property in Honfleur and nearby, and going out there a lot, weekends, doing work out there and God knows what. And he threatened to put these compulsory purchase orders on a lot of properties around the harbour, because English people were buying them and then immediately splitting these lovely houses off into loads of flatlets and selling them out to people as holiday homes.
Yeah.
But
I don't like over-regulation.
No,
I don't like the nanny state, and I think that laissez-faire is important. But there are some things which can't go with a huge sweep. Some things have got to be retained or have some sort of restrictions for the good of the community. Because I keep on coming back to Kennedy, who said, "Ask not what the state can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And I think that's got lost a little bit.
It never got heard by XR. They want the government to do everything. Yeah.
That's right.
Don't do as we do as we want.
Now we've got 10 minutes left, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Max, because he's a young man of 18, and he sees things differently to us, Mick. And I think it would be a good idea for him to just raise one or two of the things that he does with me and with our colleagues, and let him have a chat to you for the last 10 minutes.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Hi, Max.
Hello. So I think this is the second time I've met you.
It is indeed, yes.
One for the Queen's Jubilee, and today we've had a brief conversation about bonfire. That was interesting. And Keith was saying I do see things a little bit differently. I see things very differently to my generation. I'm very different from most people my age. Most people my age are quite liberal. But how long have you lived in Lewis?
I don't.
Oh.
Right. It's quite a lovely situation, and if you follow my Facebook, you'll find there's always the odd one of somebody who doesn't live in Lewis actually run the Lewis page, or one gentleman who was very, very polite. He referred to me as the weirdo from Worthing, but really I'm.
Oh, you live in Worthing?
No, I live in Seaford, so I'm the weirdo from Seaford now. But what actually happened, I first got involved in this part of the world because my grandmother moved to Ringmer in 1955. And that was my first visit there. 1960, when when I was supposed to be coming down from Surrey to go to the bonfire, I always thought my grandmother fobbed me off because we've been building up to it. It's a lovely holiday to come down and see the Lewis bonfire for the first time. And we got a phone call to say the town was flooded. Well, we hadn't had much rain up where I lived, so I always thought I was getting mugged off by my grandmother. And it wasn't until a few years later that I actually saw some photographs and realised exactly what had happened. But very regular to Ringmer. I actually moved down to Ringmer in '68, moved into Lewis in 1969-70, and I lived here till 1990. I still have daughters actually live here in Lewis. I've got daughters in Ringmer, daughters at Wivelsville Green. Family here, there, and everywhere.
Okay.
Married 3 times. 2 of the wives came from Lewis.
So you're married now then?
No, happily single.
So how long have you been doing bonfire for? And I'm excited because this is going to be my first ever bonfire.
I got involved in bonfire back in the '70s, and it was fun, especially the out meetings that involved quite a bit of drinking and this and that, a bit of revelry. But I didn't get really back involved into it seriously till the 2000s. And the last 11 years, I've been with Lewis Borough on their committee for a decade and holding various positions. But that's simply because if you put your stand forward to volunteer for anything, you're immediately dragged forward another 3 steps. There's a lot of work involved in getting a bonfire night together. A lot of people are involved. There's never enough people working. It's probably the same with every society and organisation going. You'll get those that will give you 100% of their effort, and there are those that will come along and simply enjoy 100% the effort that others are given. In bonfire, the derogatory term is a biffer. They turn up on the 4th to pay their badge night money, and they turn up on the 5th and walk, and you won't see them for the rest of the year. But that's every society has those. But most are genuine people. It's great fun. I love it.
Nice. So what is your position again?
At the moment, I've been the press officer for the borough for 6 or 7 years, which is interesting. It's a thoroughly interesting job. I've been vice chairman for 3 years now. I'm captain of the gate, which means I'm in charge of the security and entry to our fire site, and most importantly of the ticketing, getting the finance, getting the money out of the night, and captain of security. So I'm in charge of the SIA guards we have, the security detail that come in, and we employ outsiders because obviously we're not allowed to manhandle anyone. So we need to have the appropriate number of, for legal reasons, of badged SIA guards.
What's an SIA?
Security industry authorised. They are professional security people. And we have to comply. There are a lot of laws you have to comply by, and one of them is having the right number of marshals for the number of people you've got. But yes, we have quite a brigade of security staff looking after our pig borders, for instance, because while we're out in the streets walking, we don't want other people walking inside and helping themselves to whatever's lying around. We have to have security sitting up on our fire site because the fireworks they're all fenced off and everything else, but they're sitting up there ready to be fired. So we need to have security personnel up there in case anybody decides they want to try and climb our security fences or whatever. So it's quite important, but it's a background thing. You don't really notice them, but you'd certainly notice them if they weren't there and something went wrong.
Okay. Well, this is going to be my first bonfire this year. I've never been. I've seen some videos. Of how crazy it can get here, but I've never been. So this is going to be quite a shock because I'm going to be out in the streets filming for Mirador.
Lovely.
So hopefully I'll see you out and about.
You will see me, I'm sure, at some point. I'm really pleased to hear, however, you're going to be filming it. In the last year or so, we've had the fantastic event of the War Memorial being streamed live. Now, this is great because I only ever see at the War Memorial what my society do, and that's true for everyone else. They see what their society does, and it's not a huge area up there, so the greater part of the public do not get to see what's going on. By having it streamed live, loads of people saw it. Uh, and the more live streaming that goes on, the better it is because it gets things out to people, and of course, it can be replayed afterwards.
Yeah, I think Mirador last year did it live. We definitely did it live, and we got about 5,000, 6,000 views.
Easy. It's a great help for people to be able to see what's going on, and if people are aware that they've got live streams, it's going to save them trying to run down, because one of the biggest problems on Bonfire Night is 6 different societies all holding their processions in the same area. So you're not walking non-stop. There are breaks between processions. We have actually 8 processions throughout the course from 6 o'clock at night till midnight. The public, however, they will not buy programs, so then they don't realise what's going on, and they'll suddenly be up here at the top of the town, and they see a society at the bottom of School Hill. Oh, it's all going on down there. So they try and get down there, but of course it's gone by the time they get there. And all you've got is a seething mass of people who will then try and walk back up School Hill.
And just follow the crowd.
There's another society trying to come down. The crowds haven't got it in their heads that the best thing they can do is go somewhere and stay there. Let the processions come to them. And certainly if they were able to stay static somewhere and look on the old mobile and see a procession around another part of the town, it might be helpful in keeping them more static, because all they really need to do is find a suitable viewing point, stay there, and then when it becomes time to go to the fire sites, follow the procession. But all the processions are off to their fire sites, follow them, go along and enjoy your time there. And then after the fire sites, in all fairness, our society, we come back and we wait for what we call bonfire prayers. And bonfire prayers is for us. It's our end of our evening. We're always happy to see our colleagues from other bonfire societies there, but it's not something we do for the public. If the public happen to want to get home and get on their way, good luck to them. Our bonfire prayers, which is actually held right outside here, where our very first bonfire was held. In fact, in 1850, this is where the first in-town bonfire was held, right outside here. And we end up with our tar barrels symbolically in the middle of the road together. And we have our bonfire prayers and our bit of fun, our national anthem, our Old Lang Syne, and we go home for the year until next year. But that is for us. That's for the Bonfire Society. We've had our night, and we have to be on our best behaviour. All the rest of it, we're out there processing. All got jobs to do. Get on, do it. And when we get to here at the end of the evening, that's it. We've successfully completed our jobs, and we can just have our little bit of fun.
What time does it run to and from?
Well,
What time does it usually finish?
Traditionally, bonfire used to finish exactly at midnight. And when the bonfires were actually in the town water main was left on, and the fire brigade at exactly 12 o'clock would douse the fire. We kick off, I think our last procession, which is simply from Westgate Street, round the War Memorial and back here, sets off at 10 to 12. So we tend to disperse and in fact start the big clear up at normally around 20 past 12. But to all intents and purposes, the public really ought to sort of consider that when the bonfires are over and the fireworks are over, that's the time for them to think about leaving the town.
Right.
For those in the town, it's a bit different. But the public need to think about getting their buses and getting back to their cars wherever they are.
Yeah. Well, I didn't think you could get a bus out of Lewis.
Yeah, the buses will be running from down by Tufale Tunnel from 11 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
and
It
of
goes
course,
around, right?
Yeah, they stop at the Kingston roadblock. They stop at the Ashcombe roadblock. But the buses will be allowed in from 11 o'clock at Tufale area to start taking people out, and pre-booked taxis.
Okay. All right. Well, one more question before we head off. There's multiple bonfires going on. How many bonfires at any one time?
Six.
Yeah. Well, I'm very excited because it's going to be my first time going to Lewis Bonfire. So I'll see you on November the 11th.
7th,
7th,
5th,
11th,
5th,
5th.
11th.
My bad.
11th. I do hope you are in Lewis on the 11th, because there is always a war memorial ceremony, remembrance.
Yes.
Not the Remembrance Sunday is a slightly different thing, but on the 11th there is normally a short.
Stuart, come and say goodbye to everybody. Come on, you've been part of this morning as
Goodbye, everybody.
right. Stuart is saying goodbye grumpily from the back. He's grumpy this morning. But I'll say toodle pip as well and let you close off. And Mick, thanks very much for coming in.
My pleasure.
It's always good to see you.
Always a pleasure.
It was nice to see you again.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching.